The story takes place in the city of Zuzhou, where the main character once attended Sin-E High School. Standing by the side of the school gym, young Master Lin was carefully observing everything around him. For a moment, he had the strange feeling that everything was just an illusion. Realizing he was back inside the school again, Xiao was completely shocked. As he tried to figure out what was going on, the other students continued with their tests, aiming to meet the requirements for the physical exam. That's when it finally hit him. He had returned to the exact day of the school's physical test. Looking in the mirror, Lin was stunned to see he was back in his 17-year-old body. Memories from his past life came rushing back, a life where not even powerful clans or emperors could stop him. But in the end, his greatest enemy rose up and took the life of the woman he loved most. Now, with this second chance, Lin was determined to rewrite his fate. Getting revenge on those who had caused him pain, even divine beings, had become his new purpose. At that exact moment, a hidden power within him began to awaken. Lin could feel his Shunyu constitution activating once again, surging with intense energy. Meanwhile, the instructor was about to evaluate a pretty clumsy student named Qing, who surprisingly managed to pass. Right after that, Zhou stepped up for his test, confident he would succeed. At the same time, Xiao was overwhelmed by memories of a tragic event involving a young girl from his past life. The girl then walked up to the measuring device and struck it with full force, recording an impressive 366 pounds. The result was so shocking that it drew praise from everyone, who started cheering for Qin's incredible strength and performance. In the middle of all the excitement, Lin made his way through the crowd of students and accidentally bumped into Cannon. She immediately got annoyed and started complaining harshly. Lin quickly tried to apologize, explaining that it wasn't on purpose. But the hot-tempered girl grabbed her whip and swung it at him. Even while dodging her attacks, Lin kept apologizing, insisting it had really been an accident. Still, Cannon stayed aggressive, continuing to come at him with full force. At that moment, Qing stepped in, asking Cannon to calm down since he still needed to take his exam. That's when the instructor suddenly called Lin up for the physical test. Surprised, Lin wondered if he had heard his name right. After all, back then, he and the instructor barely even knew each other. Xiao noticed it too. It was true. They hadn't built any real connection yet. With a slight smile, Lin responded that it was indeed him. Then he walked over to the strength testing machine, where the trainer was already waiting. But Lin knew very well he couldn't show his full power. That would definitely cause unnecessary trouble. Pretending to be unsure, he commented that he probably couldn't even hit 176 pounds. Still, he figured that 1,100 pounds would be a safe number, impressive enough to surprise people, but not enough to cause a stir. He adjusted his fist against the punching pad and struck. The result left everyone completely speechless. The machine displayed an incredible 1,543 pounds, stunning everyone around. The tension in the air grew even heavier. Not long after, Lin received a notification on his phone. Glancing at the screen, he saw that his older brother was home. Suddenly, painful memories from his past life flooded his mind. The day he left his family, a day that ended in tragedy with his brother's suicide. That event had destroyed his family back then, and he swore that this time it wouldn't happen again. While he was lost in thought, Xiang, still furious, shouted at him, trying to provoke him once more. But Lin completely ignored her and walked straight toward the exit, leaving her furious, unable to believe he was brushing her off like that. Meanwhile, King walked over to the now damaged strength tester, staring at it in disbelief. It was hard to accept that a 17-year-old could have that kind of power. He simply couldn't figure out where it came from. At the same time, Lin was sprinting through the streets, rushing home, his heart pounding with worry. As soon as he got there, he started calling out for his brother, but there was no response. Panicking, he searched the house until, in the next room, he found Xian smiling as he saw Lin come in so fast. Without thinking twice, Lin ran over and hugged him tightly, saying how much he had missed him. Confused, Xian looked at him, wondering why he was acting so strange. Trying to hide his anxiety, Lin asked if everything was okay, if something bad had happened. Thinking his brother was worried about the physical exam, Xian asked if he had failed. Without even waiting for an answer, he tried to comfort him, saying it was perfectly fine to be an ordinary person. Most people live good lives that way. He was already inviting Lin to have lunch when, out of nowhere, Lin revealed that he had actually passed, not only passed, but scored the highest of all. Soon, he said, he would be attending one of the top universities. The news left Xian completely stunned, unable to believe what he was hearing. They both sat down for lunch, a table full of dishes that Xian had lovingly prepared. During the meal, they talked about the family's future. Xian explained that a lot now depended on Lin, especially since their father had disappeared and their older brother was left disabled, no longer able to protect the family's old martial arts school. Thinking about it, Lin remembered everything that had happened in his previous life. With conviction, he promised that this time, things would be different. He said he would take back everything their family had lost, and more than that, he would find a way to heal his brother, to restore the dignity and hope that had been stolen from them. Xian appreciated the concern, but said that his condition was something extremely difficult to cure. Even so, Lin remained determined. Right then, a loud, aggressive knock shook the door. A voice, filled with arrogance, demanded that someone come out immediately. It was the new boyfriend of Xian's ex-girlfriend. As soon as he walked in, Yao, with clear disdain in his eyes, announced that he had no intention of staying involved with someone stuck in a wheelchair, and that he had finally found his true love. The shock hit hard. In that instant, Lin realized that in his past life, this guy, Li, was the one who pushed his brother into despair and ultimately led him to take his own life. Heartbroken and stunned, Xian asked how she could do this after all the years they spent together. But Ju, full of arrogance, answered without the slightest bit of shame. She made it clear that, unlike him, she was strong, had money, and, as she put it, could walk on her own. Then she threw a wad of cash onto the table, as if it were the price of ending the relationship, and mocked that he should consider it a gift, that honestly, he didn't even deserve that much. Wearing a smug smile, Li showed off her brand new luxury bag, making sure everyone understood it cost thousands of dollars, something Xian could never afford. As if that wasn't enough, Li stepped closer, raised his hand, and slapped Xian hard across the face, humiliating him even more. He sneered, saying that someone like him was nothing but useless sitting in that wheelchair. The young master was practically burning with rage, but forced himself to stay calm while his older brother shouted, demanding that they leave the house immediately. But Xian completely lost control. He kicked the wheelchair, knocking it over and sending Xian crashing to the floor. Right after, one of the thugs, furious, started beating a defenseless man without mercy, someone who couldn't even stand up to protect himself. That was the final straw. The young cultivator couldn't hold back anymore. He charged at you, landing blow after blow with full force. Xian couldn't even compare what he was seeing to anything in his life. Lin just wouldn't stop. He kept kicking, again and again. He tried to get up at one point, but Lin rushed him again, this time switching to punches. The result? You took another brutal series of solid hits from Lin. Xiao, watching it all unfold, was frozen in shock. She yelled that he had no right to do any of this. She then tried to step in to stop him, clearly shaken, saying that he couldn't just hit a woman. But right at that moment, the teen struck her. Grabbing her by the nose, Lin shouted that she wasn't acting like a real woman anyway, not when she did things like this. He said he normally didn't hit real women, but with her, he was more than willing to make an exception. Terrified, Tian started apologizing over and over, begging him to let it go. Zhao told him that if he had actually stuck with martial arts and kept learning, maybe he could understand something. But the way he was now, he was nothing. Just an empty shell who was about to learn a painful lesson. Moments later, the young cultivator started completely dismantling that arrogant guy. After a few minutes, Zhou helped him back to his feet, and together, they made their way toward the exit. Xian thanked his younger brother for standing up for him, but still felt crushed deep down. The whole situation brought back the painful reminder that he had already started noticing how selfish they were a long time ago, especially after everything that just happened. He remembered how she never even came to visit him, and how, once, he even sold things he truly loved just to buy her a necklace. Out of nowhere, Zeo said that pretty soon he was going to find the right medicine, something that would definitely get his brother back on his feet. His older brother smiled, saying he couldn't wait for that day to come, so they could travel together like they always dreamed. Lin, of course, was already set on getting revenge against all those criminals who had driven Xian to such a dark place in the past. Meanwhile, Zan and Yao were already sitting inside the car. Zan pulled out his phone, called some thugs, and ordered them to take care of the two brothers for good. The mercenaries didn't hesitate to name their price, 2 million. She turned to Yu, asking if he was really sure about finishing this. He said yes, and even asked if she still had feelings for that guy in the wheelchair. Xiao said her only real concern was the police, and that she didn't feel anything for Xian anymore. Qian made it clear that spending those 2 million was worth it, and the police wouldn't dare get involved. That's when someone knocked on the front door. Zeo instantly tensed up and told his brother that he would go check, probably someone coming to help them. He really believed Yuno had calmed down and was back to settle things. But when he opened the door, the young cultivator was shocked and immediately started speaking his mind without holding back. Standing there were Chin and his sister, Canon. Lin couldn't understand what was going on and asked why they were acting like this. He explained that not long ago, someone really awful had come around and filled his head with the wrong ideas. Out of nowhere, the younger girl apologized for her sister's behavior, saying she could be difficult. Then she turned to Canon, asking her to do the same. Lin also tried to apologize, but Canon refused completely. Right then, Xiao remembered again the moments from his past life, how losing his brother had pushed him into a sadness so deep it felt impossible to escape. It was because of that memory that Lin was so determined to prevent it from ever happening again. He gently touched her face and told her that nothing bad was going to happen to her. Canon immediately grabbed her whip again and tried to strike him, saying her sister was the one who came to apologize, not her. Still, she extended her hand. Lin quickly apologized for how he had acted earlier, admitting that she actually reminded him of an old girlfriend. Out of politeness, the girl replied that nothing serious had really happened, but she made it very clear that she had no intention of apologizing to him. A bit annoyed, he asked his sister to calm down and stop acting like that because, thanks to her, they were always getting into trouble. Qian, on the other hand, just couldn't understand why Qing was siding with that guy. Right after that, they hurried off, leaving Zhao's property behind, and said goodbye to him. But then, unexpectedly, Lin offered to walk them home. That way, no one would mess with them along the way. At that moment, Qing told her older brother that, honestly, it wouldn't be a bad idea. But as always, the stubborn sister didn't like it and flat out refused. Qing tried once again to talk some sense into her, saying she always ruined everything with that attitude. And so, they all walked together toward the girl's house, chatting casually along the way. During the walk, Qing kept striking up conversations with Lin, which, of course, made her sister even more annoyed. The boy, meanwhile, just laughed it off, paying no mind to Canon's constant attempts to get under his skin. Naturally, Xiao didn't care about it at all and kept treating her sister kindly. As they passed by, heading toward the house, Lin suddenly noticed a strange noise coming from the bushes. Instantly, he turned toward the sound and ordered whoever was hiding to show themselves. It didn't take long before a group of armed thugs stepped out, saying they'd been paid a good amount to take him out. The boy asked if they were seriously planning to kill him just for a couple million. Their leader made it clear he wasn't joking. These were going to be Lin's last moments. He even bragged that their gang was one of the most powerful in the city. Right after saying that, he charged the boy. Xiao moved quickly, dodging a knife strike, and asked if those weapons were actually infused with qi. With an evil grin, the thug replied that Lin knew way too much to be left alive. The young cultivator didn't waste any time. He struck back hard, dropping several of them to the ground in one single move. The leader, completely shocked, asked if Lin had already reached the normal qi stage. Realizing how terrified they were, the young cultivator didn't hesitate. He ordered all of them to get on their knees before it was too late. At that moment, they finally started to understand exactly who they were messing with. But no one could figure out how Lin could be that powerful at such a young age. To them, it was a total mystery. Xiao still tried to order the thugs to attack again, but none of them had the guts to move. One even said there was clearly no way they could stand a chance against someone like him. Another quickly agreed, telling the boss they should just get out of there. No amount of money was worth this fight. That's when the gang leader realized his own men were about to abandon him, and he'd have to handle this alone. Some of them even tried to run, but escaping from Lin wasn't that simple. One, shamelessly, even dropped to the ground pretending to be a crying child, begging for mercy. Xiao, who wasn't a monster, agreed to spare their lives, but only if the boss handed over something valuable as an apology. The guy immediately understood that his life was worth way more than that dagger, no matter how expensive it was. So, without thinking twice, he handed it over to Lin as a sign of surrender. Of course, the young cultivator accepted and made it perfectly clear they were never to show up in his territory again. The thugs stood there completely frozen, speechless, as Xiao stared at them with eyes that seemed to pierce straight into their souls. It was only then they understood the smartest thing to do was disappear as fast as possible, before things got even worse. Lin, on the other hand, took a deep breath, relieved. He knew just how close he'd come to dying. If those guys had been just a bit more skilled, he might not have made it. After all, that dagger was reinforced with 2 layers of qi, and had almost destroyed all his equipment. And to make things worse, he was still only at the basic qi stage, where he had to use his abilities far more carefully. That blade, in fact, was already at the 2nd qi stage. There are 10 in total. After the 8th come the legendary weapons. Just for comparison, a blade like that would easily cost around 700 grand. But against Grand Masters, it wouldn't be much use anymore. Even so, that weapon still had a lot of potential to be upgraded. A high-level cultivator could easily turn it into an insanely powerful dagger. Still, truly powerful fighters sometimes didn't even need weapons. Their own fists were far more dangerous than any blade. Meanwhile, his older brother came running over, super worried, asking where he'd disappeared to. The teenager replied that he'd just walked the girls home. It was pretty late, and he didn't want anything bad happening to them. Out of nowhere, Xian, half smiling, commented that Qing was really pretty and that Lin shouldn't waste an opportunity like that. She was a real diamond. Xiao laughed and told his brother to just go to bed. He was planning to call it a night too. Once in his room, Lin threw himself onto the bed, grabbed the dagger, and stared at it, thinking about how he could upgrade it. In his past life, he had spent years learning how to refine weapons, so he knew exactly what needed to be done. He started working on it before the sun even came up. But suddenly, out of nowhere, the dagger slipped from the magic sphere. Right then, Xiao froze in shock. For some reason, he couldn't upgrade that blade anymore. That's when the real shock hit. He realized he was, in fact, Emperor Muner, but somehow he no longer had the power to enhance his own weapons. The young cultivator understood he'd now have to handle his problems the hard way, including dealing with Jia. And without that dagger, he could no longer allow anyone to mock him or his brother, like they did in his past life when everyone called him the disgrace of the family. At that moment, the young cultivator fell deep into his memories once again. He remembered everything he'd been through, especially the day he lost Xian. And what hurt the most was knowing that, even in the middle of that tragedy, everyone still blamed him. Because people they'd rather judge and slap labels on others than try to understand. But if you really looked closer, it was clear the one truly responsible for everything was Yao. The teenager swore one day he would get revenge on everyone who humiliated his brother. The next day, Li Kanhian had a great time, completely unaware of what was really going on. Later, everyone went to rest, ready for a good night's sleep. But that rest was quickly interrupted by the servant Yu, which, obviously, made the boss furious. Without warning, Yu barged straight into his bedroom and got punched right in the face by his own boss, who stormed out into the hallway, beating him down while yelling that he should never bother him at a time like this. Even while getting his face smashed, Yu managed to explain that there was a group of mercenaries waiting for him in the living room, along with someone else. Turns out it was Jean. And she was clearly pissed, not only because she'd been forced to wait, but also because she had to pay for it on top of that. Right away, Boss Chien basically turned into a little obedient puppy, practically begging Jean to handle the problem called Xiao. One of the mercenaries suddenly chimed in, saying that the kid was just pretending to be a high school student, but in reality, he had a hook. Jean, half suspicious, snapped back, saying that was impossible. After all, if that were true, that kid would have to be at least 60 years old. Still, the thug insisted, swearing it was the truth. He didn't hold back, calling him crazy and telling him to shut his mouth and stop spitting nonsense in front of the adults. But the mercenary stood his ground, saying that, honestly, none of them could even compare to that kid. Out of nowhere, one of the mercs, threw a heavy punch at the kid, sending him flying. What nobody expected was that Jean, the high-ranking boss, didn't care one bit. In fact, she actually looked like she was enjoying the show. Standing nearby, Zen was clearly loving every second of watching Jean show off her skills. Out of the blue, Jean said the job would cost $2 million. But if they wanted her to deal with the mercenaries for good, she'd tack on another $4 million. That offer obviously went down easy, and the ridiculously greedy Jean agreed without even thinking twice. Meanwhile, Yu threw out that same old line of his, that money solves every problem, and as long as he had cash, he didn't need to worry about anything in life. That's when Xiao stepped forward, staring him down with a serious look, and fired back that, for once, Zen actually said something true. They started going back and forth over, how small do you want it this time? But out of nowhere, Xiao shut it down, refusing to keep playing along with that ridiculous conversation. Suddenly, Lin stepped right in front of them, looking him dead in the eyes, and said it straight. Yeah, Yu's nothing but a worthless piece of trash, the kind who'd even kill his own men if it was convenient for him. And then, with zero hesitation, he added, if you want to kill me, then go ahead. Try. Desperate, Yu immediately called for the bodyguards, but before they could even react, Xiao grabbed a handful of walnuts, yes, walnuts, and threw them with such insane force that the guys were completely stunned, having no idea where that even came from. They didn't even have time to pull their weapons. Right after, the young cultivator stared straight at Xiao and Koyan and declared, today you're going to pay for every single humiliation you made my brother go through. And that means dying. Without wasting a second, he grabbed a chunk of wood and charged straight at Li, yelling that they had to pay for what they'd done. To him, there was only one outcome for this, death. Li, realizing the danger, immediately tried to throw Xiao under the bus, screaming that it had all been his idea. The girl, shocked, jumped in, saying that it wasn't exactly like that she wasn't the one who suggested it first. But honestly, at that point, it didn't even matter anymore. The young cultivator had already made up his mind. They were both going to pay. And he made that crystal clear. But then, out of nowhere, Jean showed up. Effortlessly, she blocked his attack. Without even flinching, she glanced over at the guy known as Fatman and said, yeah, the price just doubled. That kid's way stronger than he looks. Panicking, Fatman freaked out, yelling that he'd pay whatever it took, as much money as she wanted. Xiao, on the other hand, suddenly realized he wasn't about to face just some random fighter. No, he was standing in front of a real martial arts master. And the fight that was about to go down was going to be brutal. During the brawl with a young teacher, Jean casually asked for 11 million to take the guy out. When he heard that, the teacher immediately tried to haggle, asking if she could cut him a deal. But Xiao jumped in, telling him not to waste that money, because they had no idea if that would actually be enough to kill the guy. The teacher didn't like that one bit and upped the offer to 12 million on the spot. Shocked, Yu ended up agreeing to the terms and told Jean to deal with Lin as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Xiao took the opportunity to strike one of the cocky fighters. But at the very last second, Jean caught his fist, and that completely threw the kid off. Then, with a cold grin, Jean said, game's over. Now you're going to find out what it really feels like to face a true martial artist. Without hesitation, the teenager threw a punch, but Lin effortlessly grabbed his hand. Jean wondered how the young man could stop such a powerful attack, one measuring about 700 kilograms. Xiao explained that his own strength was far greater since he was at the third stage of the chi body, so he barely felt the force of 700 kilograms. Then he taunted the enemy, questioning if he was really at the intermediate stage of the normal ki body. The opponent ignored the provocation and launched a series of strikes again. Lin knew he had to end the fight quickly because time was running out. Plus, he was now at a disadvantage since Jean had grown stronger. Jean started taunting the guy, saying he wasn't as strong as he looked. They exchanged blows again, gripping fists tightly. After a while, Xiao found a gap in Sei's defense and landed a blow so strong it sent the martial arts master flying to the side. He tried to hide how much the hit affected him. Lin then focused all his strength to use the Dan Duan technique, aiming to defeat Jean once and for all. He needed to move fast because there wasn't much time or energy left. The man, stunned, asked the mercenary if he was okay, and Xiao sensed something was wrong. That's when Jean started coughing up blood. You got even more nervous. Wiping the blood from his chin, he realized he had underestimated the opponent because Jean really had special abilities. Xiao noted that the chi body's power had dropped by 300 kilograms, and that wouldn't be enough to beat Jean. He was the only one to notice it, but too late. Then Jean took a pill and put on a pair of gloves that looked very familiar, saying power doesn't always decide the fight, and sometimes you have to use tricks. Lin remembered those gloves belonged to his brother, who had sold them to buy a gift for Li. The main fight quickly resumed, fierce as ever, with Jean and Lin clashing again. In the end, the young master was thrown against a wall, breaking it with his body. Yao and Koyan got excited by the turn of events and cheered in every way they could. But the young cultivator got up quickly to keep fighting the deadly duel, even though he knew it would be much harder now that Jean was stronger. Jean himself was surprised by the young man's courage and couldn't understand why he hadn't given up yet. The teenager realized he had actually taken a much harder hit, but knew it wouldn't make a difference. At that moment, memories from his past life flashed through his mind, fighting countless times with his older brother and feeling similar pain. Suddenly, Xiao used a magical boost to keep fighting. It was so intense that Jen urged Jane to end it quickly. The newcomer immediately recognized the Ganqi Chi technique and could hardly believe his eyes. A kid so young reaching that level. Plus, collecting all 8 elements of the Chi body was nearly impossible. Otherwise, he would have died. Meanwhile, Lin gathered his thoughts and launched another attack on Jean. Jean responded, saying he wouldn't be fooled because Lin hadn't gathered all 8 Chi elements. Moments later, Xiao moved so fast no one noticed when he pulled out a dagger. With a swift motion, he slashed the throat of an unsuspecting fighter. The young man realized he had already killed many, and now death was closing in on him. Without hesitation, the teenager ran toward a frightened cannon. They backed away immediately, holding the knife to the man's throat. Lin demanded they hand over records of their crimes, promising to spare their lives if they cooperated. In fact, in a past life, Xiao had led an investigation and found out the fat man was a drug trafficker. Of course, the coward Borov denied everything, claiming they'd never done anything wrong. At that moment, Li said she didn't want them near her brother either and just wanted to distance herself from Xian while staying friends with him. The fat man, unable to stand the blatant lie, slapped her across the face and ordered her to shut up immediately. Xiao wasn't going to tolerate that and was determined to end it all as quickly as possible. He started insulting Guyan, saying she never truly loved him. Then he claimed he would take those notes straight to the young master. Lin warned that if Yusi tried to move, she would cut his throat on the spot. At the same time, Chan understood how valuable those notes were to the young master and realized how much he didn't want them falling into Zhao's hands. Just then, outside the window, they heard the flashing lights of the police. The officers had followed them to a large estate. Nervous, Yu asked if the young man had really called the police. He confirmed he had and said he wouldn't scold him personally for it, but now he would be spending a lot of time behind bars. At that moment, Jiao appeared carrying several books, saying they contained a complete list of 100 crimes committed by the group. Suddenly, the police stormed the mansion and arrested the girl who was with them. After some time, the young man went with the police to an apartment, where they thanked him for helping catch the criminals. Captain Jua explained that for years he had been trying to catch these criminals who committed countless crimes, constantly changing names and avoiding the law for months. The young master also thanked them, admitting he would have been in trouble without their help. The most surprising part was seeing the young cultivator shocked to learn that Jean had survived, even after a deadly injury. Suddenly, Xiao asked June if they were going to punish the trafficker Cannon. The captain replied confidently that the man would face the death penalty and that he himself would make sure of it. Lin was surprised. Honest police officers were rare these days. After that, the young man ran home, managing to hide his older brother's gloves, something that would make Swan very happy, because if Captain Jua found out, he would definitely confiscate them. Meanwhile, Jean and a frightened Yu were locked up, waiting to see what would happen. You couldn't believe some high school students had managed to beat him up. Suddenly, he grabbed the fat man by the neck and demanded he tell everything he knew about the kid. The coward, terrified, spilled everything, including the address and the fact that the disabled boy's older brother was involved. Jean was satisfied with the information and tried to pick the handcuffs with a master key, but failed. So he decided to call his brothers. Jean passed on all the details he needed and ordered that the criminal be hung from a bridge. The next morning, Xiao showed the magical gloves to his older brother, who was surprised and asked where he had taken them. Xiao told the whole story, saying he had bought them secondhand. Naturally, the brother was skeptical that the teenager had gone to such lengths just to return something that belonged to the family. The older brother smiled and thanked his younger brother. Lin asked him to calm down, and Xian realized that his brother fully understood the gesture. In fact, Xiao had only returned the family heirloom they had inherited from their parents. The young man smiled again and said he would never lose those gloves again. At that moment, someone knocked at the front door. It was Yang, a troubling teenager, who asked why he had come. Lin remembered that Yang was the only friend who hadn't rejected him during tough times, even knowing that in a past life he had died. Very worried, Yang was invited inside, so he wouldn't have to stand outside. Soon, Yang explained that the dark matter cult was looking for them and wanted to hang Xiao from the bridge. He suggested it would be best to pack up and leave immediately. But Lin, confident, said they wouldn't run or submit to that faction. Yang insisted that he couldn't face them because their development stage was far beyond his own. The boy realized that if they ran, the enemies would come after Li the next day and kill him. The fat man was shocked by this and continued saying they didn't stand a chance of being saved. Xiao wasn't afraid of high-level fighters because the night before he had already faced an even stronger opponent who probably had ties to that clan and asked them to take revenge. For that reason, the teenager told Yen to hide Xian somewhere safe and went to get his older brother's gloves, determined to end the nurse's problem once and for all. Those gloves were a family heirloom, and Lin knew exactly how to use them to multiply his strength tenfold. Of course, the main character had already faced that faction in a past life, but never expected them to show up so soon. He also knew very well that the world had been divided between light and darkness for a long time. The police might influence things a little, but the Dark Matter Guild was full of masters ready to kill. One thing was certain. There were no good people inside those criminal organizations. The world was set up so that the weak ended up with ordinary jobs, while the strong joined the police, only to later return to the criminal side. The young cultivator's path was completely different from that of any ordinary person. Suddenly, Xiao found himself wishing he could go to the world of immortals. But to do that, he needed to strengthen and modify his dagger, which could only be improved twice. He made one last attempt to enhance the blade. After a while, he succeeded, and the dagger instantly changed its appearance. However, Xiao realized he had lost something important. The transformations suddenly stopped. Then he understood he had managed a double transformation on the dagger, raising its hardening level and, as a result, its strength, which was unprecedented. Moreover, the weapon now held two elements, fire and water, and he could switch between them. The dagger could also change shape, becoming much better than before. Looking at a vase on the table, Xiao decided to test the blade's new properties. In an instant, a water attack shattered the vase, sending shards all over the room. The result was impressive, even though the table got damaged. He hadn't expected the blade to become so powerful. Meanwhile, Jane's older brother called Kuan, the leader of the cannon group, who came to Lin's house intent on quick revenge. He broke down the front door of the teenager's home, but Lin immediately attacked with his modified dagger and demanded the stranger buy him a new door. Kuan, brutal and fierce, asked if Lin had really nearly killed his brother. Xiao realized Kuan was responsible for what happened and knew he shouldn't attack him yet. Kuan then rushed to strike Lin, but the boy dodged easily and knocked Kuan out. The two then entered a fierce duel, their strengths almost equal. Lin said he couldn't defeat Kuan with simple techniques, and that he would soon go after Kuan's brother. The master used all his power, but couldn't get the desired result, as Xiao naturally dodged every attack, even taunting Kuan by saying he was too weak for a fighter at the third stage of the normal chi body. Kuan realized it had been a long time since he'd faced such strong opponents. He felt the night was going to be intense. Lin just smiled calmly in response. The leader of the group launched another attack, throwing a crushing punch with a force of 2,000 kilograms. Still, he couldn't land a hit on the young master, who stayed unharmed. Right after, Xiao grabbed Kuan's hand and took him down, saying brute strength wasn't enough, and even his younger brother was much stronger. Lin took a series of heavy attacks, while Kuan warned him he had no right to laugh at him. The boy replied he wasn't laughing. He was just stating a fact. The angrier Kuan got, the more Lin realized that if this fight ended quickly, he'd already be dead. The impact of Kuan's punches would definitely knock him out. Then Kuan unleashed a powerful combo, but Xiao blocked every strike with ease. That's when he knew he had to change tactics if he wanted a chance. At the right moment, Lin landed a strong hit that broke Kuan's nose. Kuan admitted it had been a long time since he'd seen his own blood and that he had underestimated this opponent. He really could go toe-to-toe with him. Lin began to understand his strength still wasn't enough to beat Kuan. After all, 2 strong hits had only broken a nose. Kuan said he hadn't even shown his full power yet and seemed suspicious that something was off. He started thinking about what trick to use next. Suddenly, he charged with much greater speed and used his magical abilities to land another blow, breaking the wall of the neighboring house. Lin, who thought he had already won, was shocked. Kuan said all that was left was to hang him from the bridge for Xin Yi. But in the dust, he saw something shining and stayed alert. A magical arrow shot toward him, but Kuan dodged just in time, realizing the young master really had a weapon. The group leader was stunned. He had never seen anything like it, only heard about such things from the teachers. The neighbor, frightened, asked who they were and what was happening. Lin told her to stay calm and promised that Kuan would soon pay for what he had done. Once again, Kuan boldly charged at Lin. The water attacks from Lin's dagger forced the criminal to back off, convinced that this teenager was truly an amazing fighter. Lin didn't give up and kept chasing Kuan, who was injured but said he had to make up for the damage done and couldn't run away. At one point, Xiao caught up to Kuan, pressed the dagger against his throat, and asked if he really saw that weapon. Kuan tried to shake off the dagger and attack again, but the young master easily blocked the blow and held the blade firmly against his throat. Kuan was in a critical situation, cornered by Lin's dagger, but he tried to play mind games with the young cultivator. He warned that if he was killed there, Lin would face prison. After all, killing a man, even a criminal, has legal consequences. Lin, however, realized Kuan didn't really want to go to jail. For him, that was a fate worse than death, and he called him worthless. Thinking he had the upper hand, Kuan confidently claimed his brother Cannon would come to save him, saying Cannon was the strongest martial artist in the city, unmatched. He asked Lin to lower the dagger, hoping to use his brother's strength as leverage. But Lin wasn't intimidated. Instead, he started stabbing Kuan with the dagger, saying Kuan wouldn't get the chance to report anything. Wounded and terrified, Kuan fell to the ground and begged Lin to stop attacking him. Lin agreed to spare his life only if his brother was arrested. And that's exactly what happened. Soon, Cohen was behind bars, furious, questioning how a high school student nearly killed him. Captain Jua was extremely grateful to Lin and couldn't stop thanking him for the help. Lin warned he'd need Jua's support again the next night and asked him to be ready when called. The captain began imagining that helping catch all the criminals might even earn him an honor. But he didn't yet know the real reason behind Lin's actions. Leaving the police station, Lin remembered his past life, especially the moment his beloved entered university, triggering a family collapse that led to Qing's death. He knew he couldn't let history repeat itself. Meanwhile, the leader of the Canon Guild was shocked to learn that Cohen had been arrested with the help of a student, something he couldn't believe since it seemed absurd that a high schooler was stronger than a third-stage fighter. His servants suggested canceling an important reservation tied to the leader's plans, but he refused, grabbing the subordinate's throat with magic and ordering him not to get involved. The subordinate begged for forgiveness, and the leader let him go. Another man in the room coughed and quickly left, not wanting to interfere with the boss's plan to kill the SE leader, an act that would boost his reputation. Meanwhile, Lin called Shunny to let her know he wouldn't be home anytime soon. Tomorrow was Qing's birthday, and he couldn't miss the celebration. Then his phone rang. Surprised, Lin answered and heard a friendly female voice inviting him to rent a house. Curious, he declined, saying he was just a poor student. The woman revealed it was Qing, just joking with him. She then asked if he'd be free tomorrow night for a party, hoping he would make time to go. Lin gladly accepted, but felt she might have something else to ask. When Lin asked if there was more to say, she admitted there was. She explained that her father had set up a blind date, but she didn't want to meet this rich guy. She grew shy and suddenly stopped mid-story. Even though it was awkward for a teenager to say, she gathered the courage to continue on her own. Soon after, Qing asked Lin to pretend to be her boyfriend, which caught him off guard since she seemed to have dreamed about it. She said it would only be for one night and promised a good reward if it went well. Lin realized this was a great gift for any young guy, but felt confused and silent, full of doubts. In the end, he agreed to be her boyfriend just for that night. Qing blushed. At that moment, Qian quietly entered the room and asked what was going on. Qing got startled and acted a bit strange, saying she just wanted to go to sleep. Aina went straight to her room, making her sister even more curious. Suddenly, she realized Shin was in love with someone because he acted the same way when he liked Shu. Meanwhile, Xiao thought he should probably be at the party, but considered making a surprise visit instead. He had won all previous fights thanks to a magical dagger. That's why Lin spent the whole night cultivating to grow stronger. At the same time, he wanted to reach the place of the soul to understand true immortality. To do that, he needed to master the highest level of martial arts and magic. After a long time meditating with great dedication, the teenager finally improved. His energy spread out in all directions, signaling his progress. Xiao reached the third stage of the Qi body, which was a great achievement. However, he could only use the divine resolution once every 2 weeks. Lin sensed that the world of immortals was getting closer, and that soon he would return there. The next day, late at night, Qing's birthday party took place. Her father, Wen, and his wife, Jie, welcomed many important guests, including the Shang family. Shu and Qin greeted everyone warmly. Ju, Lao, and Chu noticed they hadn't seen each other in a long time. The head of the NA family asked about the young heirs, who smiled and greeted everyone. Shin thought to himself that he truly deserved the daughter of such a man and could give her a good life. Meanwhile, Qing was worried because Xiao still hadn't arrived, while Chu had already shown up with his father. Suddenly, Wen knocked on her door, asking her to come down as guests were arriving. She didn't want to, but when she saw an arrogant young man, who Shu had asked to speak with her before joining the group, she agreed. Chu, of course, was fine with it. The boy started showering her with compliments, but then suddenly reached out, asking to touch her delicate skin. Shocked by his boldness, she told him to behave, reminding him he was in her house. The young man, full of arrogance, said that soon this house would belong to him. Without any ceremony, he threw himself on the bed and said she'd have to return the favor properly or be forbidden from leaving the basement. Ching was stunned and didn't hesitate to push him off the bed immediately. He hadn't expected her to be so stubborn or to resist his tricks. Bitterly, he threatened that he would soon dominate her and that she'd end up kneeling before him. And if he wasn't in a good mood, he might even kill her. She froze with fear at those words. It was clear his family was dangerous. Meanwhile, in a forest near the village, Cao and his henchmen watched everything from afar. Quan thought a life of luxury was boring and uninteresting. He believed that the beautiful estate would soon be destroyed, turning to ruins, and the expensive machines worth millions would be reduced to ashes. Suddenly, the mansion's guard spotted a strange young man arriving on an old, broken bicycle. Xiao, unable to use his device because of the mountainous terrain, had borrowed the bike from a neighbor to get there. When he reached the village, the guards were curious about him. Since Xiao hadn't had time to buy better clothes, he was wearing whatever he had. The guards quickly tried to kick him out, saying this wasn't a place for homeless people. Feeling awkward, Xiao said the birthday girl had invited him to the party. The guards laughed, thinking he was making it up. They even mocked his clothes, saying they were worse than their uniforms, and told him he had to leave. But then Qing came running, smiling happily. She grabbed Zhao's hand and led him inside the house. The guards were stunned by the sudden turn of events, worried they might lose their jobs because of it. Xiao took advantage of the moment and turned to them with a grin, saying he was about to eat good food and drink expensive wine. They were curious, wondering if he was old enough to drink since he wasn't 18 yet. He just laughed it off as a joke. The head of the family thanked all the guests for coming to his daughter's party. Afterward, Wen went with Sang to discuss signing an important contract. But suddenly, someone appeared holding Qing's hand right in front of them. Shu was surprised, unsure who this bold guy was. She whispered to Xiao to hold her hand tight so everyone would know he owned her. Xiao said nothing and kept holding her hand. The guests started whispering, unsure who he was. Xian, however, was impressed by his sister's courage to stand up to their father. The Sang family had also worked hard to make this moment happen. After a few seconds, Lin politely bowed to everyone and introduced himself as Gai Qing. This shocked everyone, including Cao. Everyone began saying the party had gained a new spark with the presence of this young man, who seemed truly special, not as simple as he appeared. Shu said the boy shouldn't act like that, and if he only wanted money, he should get a job. But the main guy went straight to the point. He said he didn't need money, and that he and Shu's daughter had been together for a long time. Her father then warned her to be careful choosing a boyfriend, saying one wrong step could destroy their family. Then, out of nowhere, the girl declared that she really loved Xiao and wanted to marry him. Everyone at the party was shocked, speechless. One, furious, said she had no right to question him and tried to slap her. She closed her eyes and turned her head, but couldn't avoid it. Suddenly, the young master grabbed her father's hand and told him he shouldn't do that. He added that if he wanted to vent his emotions, he was ready to talk like a man. Everyone there was impressed by the boy's bravery. Of course, Shu agreed with what Xiao said and moved to handle the situation, but Lao stopped him, saying he shouldn't get angry with the young man. Wen quickly apologized, explaining that he had learned that behavior in the NEA and hadn't expected the change in the boy. Chan smiled slyly and said he was the one who should be apologizing. At that moment, several armed men stormed the farm. Lao announced that this would be the end of the X family. Chu ordered the bandits to capture all the guests and to make sure no one left the mansion. Chaos broke out. Everyone ran, trying to escape. Wan, shocked, angrily asked Shang why he had set this up. Lao just smiled and said he never liked Shu, especially because Shu didn't deserve the luxurious life he had. Also, Shu had recently tried to ruin his business, so this was the Siam family's karma. The guests tried to rush to the street, but all the doors were locked. Xiao warned everyone not to use the back exit, suspecting bandits were there, but no one listened to him. Lin warned that if they went that way, they'd be killed. They tried the reserve exit, but it was locked too. No one could call the police because there was no signal, and silencers were used in the house. Qing quickly looked at Xiao and told him to leave, but he said he had promised to help her and would stay. At that moment, Chu told his father to have some fun before killing everyone, and when gave the permission. Then the bandits started dragging the girls away and attacking the older women. But when didn't give up, he tried to protect the guests, warning that no one would be harmed while he was alive and that Sang wouldn't dare do anything to him. Lao, however, quickly said that one still didn't understand the power of normal body qi and that he would have to use extreme measures. Moments later, Lao pointed a gun at Wen's head and his henchmen. Wen realized he was in deep trouble and powerless. Seeing the moment to act and protect the Si family, the young cultivator didn't hesitate. He pressed a dagger to Chu's neck. But Qian jumped into the fight too. Using her whip, she grabbed Chu by the neck and dragged him, ordering everyone to step back to avoid trouble. She threatened to break his neck if they didn't comply. Chu kept holding Lao's throat tightly, but Qian demanded he stop immediately. She also ordered all of Chu's servants to drop their weapons until he released the boy. Shang saw the situation and ordered everyone to lower their weapons and wait for further instructions. The guests, impressed, started admiring the girl's confidence, thinking she was amazing. Only the main character knew this wasn't simple, that there was something going on behind the scenes, and that Lao had clearly planned a twist. Suddenly, a strange noise came from the roof, and everyone went on high alert, trying to figure out what it was. Shang smiled again and looked at his own Qian. The young master, sensing the danger, told her to run right away, knowing something was about to happen. But the stubborn girl ignored him and acted her way. Soon enough, the stranger jumped off the roof and landed on Can's head, knocking her to the ground. Even Chu was shocked and took a step back. Qing ran to confront the stranger, but the young cultivator ordered them to stop. They didn't listen and attacked, but the stranger, named Cao, easily grabbed one by the foot and the other by the hand, holding them practically frozen. The family had finally understood that this master was way too strong for them. Lao explained that this was Wan, leader of Maitrim's dark faction, someone who could kill over 100 people without blinking. The warning terrified everyone. Xiao realized the fight had started too fast, no chance to back down. Chu ordered Xiao to kill everyone except Qing, wanting a private talk with her. Wan looked at B and threatened to break the rookie's hands and make him die painfully. That's when the main character stepped in, striking Wan with a devastating blow. He began knocking down the nearby servants with brutal force, making it clear he wouldn't let anyone hurt those he loved, and that Wan would pay for it. Lin defeated the city's strongest fighter, leaving everyone amazed at his skills. Jing, surprised, realized the young man was now much stronger than during the exam. After finishing with Wan, the teenager ran to Shang's scared family. Lao, stunned, couldn't understand where this high school student got so much power. The bandits tried to protect their boss, even knowing they stood no chance. When Xiao tried to attack, Cao regained focus and dodged. With an energy-charged punch, he hit Lena hard, who didn't expect it. Still, the teenager blocked the attack, realizing he could also use Gani. Cao then asked who this young man was able to defeat him. Confidio, the confident and experienced master. He commented that he knew the name well, because his friends were already in jail. Everyone there quickly realized that the high school student was the one who had helped the police capture the Jean brothers. Wen also understood why his daughter liked that amazing guy so much. As for the injured Wan, he knew Malls would have to answer for this soon. So he ordered no one to interfere in the fight because he wanted to take his revenge personally. Lin explained that Wan had gone after his friends in prison, which was why they started destroying the property, revealing their connection. The fight that followed was intense, with both seeming almost equally strong. Shu asked King to go to the hospital with Ken and call the police. The girl was surprised and asked why he wouldn't go with them. When said he now owed a favor to the boyfriend since the young master had bravely come to defend his family. She understood that her father was right and that she needed to help. So Qing asked Shu to take her sister to the hospital because Xiao was there to protect her. The father was obviously against it, not wanting to leave his daughter alone. But at that moment, Lao grabbed June by the hair and dragged her to the ground, saying no one would leave and that today they would finally die. Shu and Qing were shocked at how cruel that Shang could be. Qing immediately told her husband and daughter to leave, but they couldn't get away. Lao then started attacking a woman, ordering her to shut up. Again, he declared that no one would leave until he allowed it. Qing couldn't stand it and, without thinking, ran to get their mother. At that moment, the bandits opened fire with pistols. Qing froze, then soon realized her dress was stained with blood. She had been hit. The protagonist heard Shu's wild scream and turned immediately, but there wasn't time to fully understand what was happening. He feared something bad had happened to King and that he couldn't waste any time. While distracted, Xiao was struck hard by cannon and thrown aside. Yao smiled, knowing that in moments like this, you can't afford to lose focus. Lin agreed, saying any distraction could cost a life, so he intended to finish the enemy quickly. Then the teenager put on a Xian glove. Wan, naive, thought a high school student wouldn't do anything to him, even one so skilled. But when Xiao threw a punch, Cao felt a new aura he had never seen before and realized he couldn't underestimate this kid. The clan leader admitted he hadn't expected such power from the young man, but still believed it wouldn't change the outcome. After all, he was an experienced fighter. But suddenly, Lin landed a powerful blow. The older brother's glove glowed with crackling lightning, and one finally understood that the boy's chi was far stronger than his. He couldn't resist the strike. After taking the painful hit, Cao backed off, unsure of what to do next. Seeing the advantage, Xiao decided to finish off the arrogant cultivator with a fierce combo. The master was reduced to a puppy before him. Without wasting any time, the protagonist delivered a powerful punch with his glove to Cannon's body. The impact sent Cannon flying across the room, causing severe damage. Everyone was shocked by what was happening. The students asked how Cannon was feeling. The bloodied leader of the Matte Dark Guild said he still had the strength to fight. Slowly and in great pain, he tried to get up, knowing he wouldn't last much longer. The young master then launched a series of powerful attacks against him, but Cannon stood firm, unmoving. The young cultivator ran forward to finish it, but suddenly he saw Qing lying on the floor, covered in blood. Xiao's fury took over, and his imposing presence silenced everyone. He demanded to know who dared to attack Qing. Startled, Lao immediately ordered his men to open fire on the teenager. Bullets flew, but the young man activated a magical barrier that protected him. Chang was stunned, even wondering if this guy was human. Soon after, Lin grabbed the dagger again and charged at Lao. Desperate, Lao begged for mercy and ran to the back of the room. But Xiao made it clear that since Lao had no right to ask for help, his violence could only be punished by death. In the next moment, the teenager attacked with a magically enhanced knife. Lao froze in place, then collapsed, dead. Chu was speechless and in shock, watching his own father die. The rest of those present fell to their knees before the young heroes, claiming they were not guilty and had only been paid to do this. Chu also knelt, saying he never knew about his father's actions. But Lin wasn't fooled by their excuses and ended those miserable lives. At the same time, Xiao spared a few bandits to hand over to the authorities, who had already arrived at the farm and ordered everyone to stay put. When Captain Jua entered, he was horrified by the bloodied scene. He stopped among the bodies and said they had arrived just in time, as everything was already over. The surviving bandits were then taken away in a police truck for legal processing. Wen quickly approached her savior, thanking him emotionally. Jan also joined them. Shu, in turn, declared that from that day forward, the young man was an honored guest in their home and had the right to ask for anything he wanted. Without hesitation, the teenager said he wanted to marry Qing. Qing's eyes widened as she looked at Xiao, realizing he was serious. He didn't seem to care much, thinking she was romantic too. But Qing quickly said it was impossible since they barely knew each other. They had only spent a few days together. Wan and Shu, both surprised, didn't understand what was going on and demanded an explanation, especially since they were talking about marriage. The young man realized he had jumped the gun and was getting into trouble again. So he explained the truth behind the proposal. Xiao wanted to be free, and that day he turned 18, a perfect age to start living life his own way. Ching finally understood what they were talking about, though she expected a different answer. Ben and Jay were pleasantly surprised by how confidently the young master spoke. Shu realized the whole situation happened because of him. If he hadn't insisted so much on commitment, none of this would have happened. The father then said the young cultivator was absolutely right, and from now on, Ching would decide what to do with her life. She was very grateful to her father for understanding and thanked him with tears in her eyes. Meanwhile, an ambulance arrived. The guards rushed the medical team to the mansion, where Ching was placed on a stretcher, still unconscious. Worried, her parents followed and got into the ambulance with her. One looked out the window and watched Xiao, realizing he was truly a good person. Ching was also injured in the car, but Xiao wasn't sure exactly what he felt for her. The police arrested Cannon, his accomplice, and their sons. Cannon had an impressive ability. He could absorb others' fighting techniques. At that moment, Captain Jua approached the young man and offered him a chance to join the police, since he had just destroyed the Mat Dark sect. Xiao replied that he didn't have the skills for that yet, and that he still needed a Class B rank. But Jan explained that with the third stage of the Chi body, that was more than enough to become a real cop. However, he warned that the stronger someone got, the greater the chance they'd stray from the right path. With that, the teenager finally believed the captain really knew his potential. Later, Xiao ran home, saying he would definitely join the police one day. Lin vanished in an unknown direction. Jua, smoking a cigarette, watched him and thought that the high school student was truly dangerous. Since they last met, Xiao had grown much stronger, strong enough to possibly defeat Cao on his own. Back home, Lin met Yang, who started talking about how incredible everything was. Shin mentioned that Jua had called them and explained how the young man handled the criminals. The boy said this was just the beginning and that the most important thing now was to heal his brother's legs. He also mentioned that a letter should arrive at the reception the next day, but Lin wasn't so optimistic about it. After that, Xiao returned to his Yanni glove and noticed he had a gift for Lin. Approaching the strong man, he suddenly handed him a modified dagger. Lin, surprised, thanked him for the expensive gift, noting the dagger was at the second stage. He immediately began testing the new weapon, swinging it around. He said he was really tired that day and needed a good night's sleep, heading to his room in a good mood. The teenager dreamed about the time when he was at the peak of his abilities. Xiao wasn't in a hurry to sleep and decided to practice some cultivation. After all, he needed to reach the fourth stage to finally heal his brother's legs. The young master also had a special technique called 5 palms, which sped up progress. So he started training intensely, but suddenly began bleeding from his ears and nose. Xiao was shocked, unsure of what was happening. At one point, Lin had to stop the cultivation, thinking the boy probably couldn't handle such a rapid breakthrough. He kept wiping the blood with napkins, but it wouldn't stop. That's when he realized he needed to slow down to avoid harming himself. The next morning, Xian came into the room with breakfast, but seeing the scene, looked confused and quietly closed the door. Xiao tried to explain he was just meditating, but Xian said he didn't need to make excuses. He already understood everything. The following day at school, a martial artist mentioned that the ex-sisters had scored an A, while most of the class had failed the physical test. There were only 5 rating categories, D, C, B, and making it tough to get the top grade needed for University A. The teacher started announcing the class grades, and most students had decent results. But when he got to Xiao, he couldn't believe it and even looked disappointed. Everyone began asking what her grade was, since Lin had missed several classes. To everyone's surprise, her grade was the highest possible, an A. The whole class was shocked and filled with envy, since very few ever got that score. Of course, Xiao already knew she would do well. The students started questioning the teacher, who actually seemed proud to announce her grade. The teacher explained that Chu Xiao earned the top score with an advantage in humanities, something even she didn't expect. Most of the classmates complained, saying she didn't deserve such a high grade. Then Lin recognized her as the neighbor who used to borrow bikes, and who had broken the wall during the fight with Kuen. He never expected her to pass the humanities exam. As the protagonist walked past her, The girl looked at him and accidentally got her envelope caught on Zhao's. She apologized and tried to pick up the folder, just like Lin, but they accidentally bumped heads. This time, Xiao apologized and asked if she was okay. Chu grabbed her folder and said everything was fine. Later, when Xiao got home, Swan met him. After checking the girl's folder from the envelope, the teenager was shocked to realize that when they mixed up the papers, their folders had gotten switched. His older brother was confused and asked why there was a picture of the girl with a different name on it. Lin sighed deeply and looked at him. The protagonist then went to the mysterious neighbor's house to retrieve his work. But he found it strange how messy and dirty the place was. He knocked on the door, but no one answered, something that only made him more suspicious. With no choice, Xiao grabbed the doorknob and the door opened. As he stepped inside, he felt a strange chill, like he was getting colder by the second. There was almost nothing in the room, just a bed, a table, and a chair. Xiao called out loudly, saying he came to get his certificate and return the folder with the work, but there was only silence in response. As he walked in a bit further, Lin found the girl collapsed on the floor. He immediately rushed to check if she was okay. Chu started regaining consciousness, and the boy let out a relieved sigh. With a trembling voice, the girl explained that she hadn't eaten in days and was starving. Without hesitation, Xiao took her home so she could have a proper meal. He prepared several dishes, and the girl started eating quickly, clearly having gone a long time without food. Xiao noticed that if his brother hadn't fallen asleep, he probably would have cooked even more for her. Still, the girl said she was more than full and had never eaten anything so delicious. Chu revealed that she suffered from hypoglycemia and had passed out after not eating properly for 3 days. Lin was surprised and joked that he wanted to lose weight, but not like that. The girl explained she wasn't trying to lose weight. She simply had no food and had been preparing for an exam. Xiao asked where her parents were, guessing they might be away on a business trip. For a few seconds, the girl went quiet, looking down, then revealed that her parents had passed away. Xiao quickly apologized, saying he didn't know, but Chu said it was fine and that she would bring him the test that was under her pillow once she finished eating. Xiao thought about how no one seemed to help her, even though everyone could see how destroyed the building she lived in was. Chu set her empty plate on the table and thanked him for the meal. With a shy smile, she said she would go grab the folder with her documents. But Xiao noticed her movements were odd and started suspecting she was hiding something important, even though he truly felt sorry for her and wanted to help. Later, Chu went back home and picked up the folder. As she turned around, a boy suddenly appeared with a mysterious look in his eyes. She told him there was no need to come to her. She would deliver the certificate. Xiao, suspicious, asked directly why she couldn't generate 20 kilograms of force during the exam, certain she was hiding something. The girl denied everything, but he touched her neck and asked her to come closer. Suddenly, a magic sphere escaped from her body, and Chu collapsed, unconscious. Shocked, Lin rushed to help her, asking what was happening. After a while, she regained consciousness, but a strange glow was still coming from her body. At that moment, one of their classmates started writhing in pain, complaining of intense cold and a sharp pain in her neck. Xiao didn't know how to help, so he held the girl by her shoulders and told her not to be afraid because he was trying to protect her. Then he noticed a strange insect near her neck, surrounded by a magic web that covered Chu's entire body. The young master was stunned. It was an ice spider, a magical parasite he had never seen before. Chu couldn't explain how the insect had gotten inside her. All she could say was that she felt extremely cold. Xiao knew the parasite had to be removed as soon as possible, but he was afraid of the risks since he was still only at the 3rd stage of qi cultivation. Even so, Lin made the decision to act and started the procedure to remove the spider. He tried to reassure Chu, letting her know she didn't need to be afraid because he was there to help. But the girl seemed to be losing consciousness again, while the ice spider kept growing, threatening her life. The teenager did everything he could to cure the sickness that was consuming her body. A few minutes later, the results started showing, and Xiao let out a sigh of relief. The ice spider had finally vanished thanks to his divine resolution. But the procedure wasn't over yet. Lin kept explaining Chu's condition as she slowly began to recover, showing signs of partial improvement. After a moment, she opened her eyes and saw her savior standing there. Suddenly, tears started running down her face as she begged him not to look at her filthy body. She hadn't even had water to clean herself. Naturally, Xiao did everything he could to calm her down, firmly letting her know that he would never dare look at her in any wrong way. And to him, she was beautiful just as she was. That only made her more upset, and she hugged him tightly, thanking him for helping her. Soon after, Xiao walked her home so she could finally take a warm shower and regain her strength. Meanwhile, he kept thinking about how that ice spider had managed to overpower him. After all, this rare technique was almost never seen in public. Suddenly, the girl came out of the bathroom wearing one of Zhao's shirts and smiled, saying her clothes had finally arrived. He smiled back and told her the shirt actually looked great on her. Then, he went back to asking about the ice spider. But Chu said she had no idea where the creature came from, since she had always been in that condition. Xiao realized something at that moment. Someone, probably King Ji, had been involved, trying to place that mark on her since birth. Chu insisted she wasn't worried because she had gotten used to living that way. But Xiao warned her that the attacks had been getting more frequent lately. She was surprised he even knew that. Out of nowhere, Lin asked how long it was until her 18th birthday. Chu, a little confused, said it was just a week away. That's when he explained that once she turned 18, the spider would explode inside her, and it would kill her. Scared, Chu asked if he was sure that was really going to happen. Xiao confirmed with conviction that his diagnosis was accurate. However, there was still a way to remove the ice spider's mark for good. Curious and hopeful, Chu asked how she could be saved. In that moment, she stepped toward him a bit too quickly, bumped into his leg, and ended up falling right on top of him. Lin quickly apologized, saying it had been an accident. Meanwhile, his older brother woke up and walked over to Zhao's room, only to see the scene. Lin tried to explain to Swan that it wasn't what it looked like, but as always, the older brother left the room without saying anything, leaving the two alone. Xiao couldn't understand why Chu was still holding on to him and asked, a bit confused. The girl said it was because he was the first person who had ever treated her with kindness and care. The boy was surprised, unsure of how to respond, and just looked at her. He felt deeply sad for this girl who had never known what it was like to have a loving family. Suddenly, Chu asked him to truly care about her. Xiao was left speechless, but he gently ran his fingers through her soft hair and said that girls shouldn't act like that, and that if they were truly meant to be together, he would do everything to make it happen. The girl cried once more, grateful for how kind he was, and hugged him again. Xiao couldn't resist and hugged her back. He remembered the beautiful goddesses who had once chased after him, hoping to win his heart. But Chu's hugs felt so sincere and gentle that he didn't want to leave. Then, out of nowhere, their noses accidentally touched, and Xiao quickly pulled away, blushing. Worried, the girl asked what was going on with him and if he needed help. Xiao said everything was fine, but explained that the next day they would need to go to a special place, somewhere that could not only heal his brother's legs, but also deal with the mysterious seal. The next day, they set off for the notorious city of Anae. Chu, curious, asked if the seal could be removed right there. Lin explained that for that, they'd need to climb the mountains, but there was a problem with transportation, something they needed to solve quickly. Suddenly, an idea came to Xiao. After a while, they were on their way to the mountains, riding on a massive ox. The ride turned out to be a real challenge for Chu, who struggled to keep her balance the entire way. By the time they reached a settlement later that night, Lin looked around carefully. He said they were in the right place, but Chu quickly noticed it felt like an abandoned area. Xiao tried to reassure her, asking her to keep her voice down since no one actually lived there, which made the girl even more nervous. Without hesitation, Xiao picked her up in his arms and jumped over the fence with her. Once in the yard, he asked for complete silence, so they wouldn't be seen or heard. Suddenly, a massive ox passed right by them and headed straight toward one of the houses. The beast stopped silently in front of the main door of a ruined building. A few seconds later, the door creaked open, and a long, monstrous tongue shot out, grabbing the ox. Chu was terrified, having no idea what was happening. Using a special technique from Gangshur, Xiao grabbed the creature's tongue with his magic hand and tried to force it out of the house. In an instant, something strange and disgusting was thrown out of the building, a physical manifestation of the five venoms attack. The enraged monster tried to strike back with its poison, but Xiao activated a protective barrier just in time. Chu suddenly remembered something she had read in an encyclopedia, that poison was extremely dangerous. Lin tried to negotiate with the demon, warning it not to resist, or death would be inevitable. But the giant toad kept trying to rip its tongue and hands free, fighting back fiercely. Out of nowhere, the monster asked how Xiao even knew about this place and why he had been granted permission to be there. Xiao calmly answered that he needed the toad's help to enter the sacred lands. The creature, stunned, demanded to know who he really was. Lin replied indifferent that it didn't matter, but what did matter was that he knew the toad killed girls every month. The demon backed away, admitting it wasn't innocent and had indeed taken the lives of many creatures. Xiao firmly demanded that the monster calm down and stop resisting. Then, with a swift move, he used his magic hands to grab the toad by the neck, giving it one last chance to cooperate or face certain death. At last, the toad agreed to help them find the entrance to the sacred lands, which lay beyond the canyon. However, it explained that the entrance was invisible to ordinary eyes, and only it could lead them there. Lin released the creature, but quickly warned it again that if it tried anything funny, it would be sent straight to the underworld. Realizing it had no chance against Xiao, the monster began guiding them toward the sacred lands. Along the way, they came across a pile of women's clothing scattered on the ground, a sight that horrified Chu. Xiao explained that those were the belongings of the toad's victims, and if they were to dig there, they would most likely find the bones of the girls. Shocked, Chu asked why the authorities didn't do anything about such cruelty. The boy realized that the demons were getting much weaker, so weak they could barely interfere with anything anymore. On top of that, this monster was far from being the strongest in the region. His friend, scared, believed the monster would just keep on killing without stopping. But Xiao made it clear that he wasn't there just looking for medicine. In fact, in another life, those demons had even treated him well, giving him friendly pats. And that only meant that, in this life, those same demons would end up dying by his hands. Meanwhile, the protagonist started remembering the moment when he and Jay got trapped, surrounded by bloodthirsty toads. Lee blamed himself for everything, thinking it was his fault they had fallen into the monster's trap. The demons, on the other hand, had decided it was time to get rid of the teenagers and were already preparing to kill them. Suddenly, one of the demons walked over to the young teacher and started touching his face. It said that human skin was really rough and figured they were probably girls, which, to the demon, meant they needed to be eaten. The young cultivator replied that if that was really the only option, then they should just get it over with. Jan completely lost it, blaming the young man for everything and saying they were about to die. But the Black Widow decided to spare them, for now, because she wanted to play with her prey before getting rid of their bodies. And before killing them, she personally drained all their blood. In the end, he realized the fear was written all over his face, but the black snake suddenly surprised him by saying it had a much better idea.